A very good morning. The discussion behind the scenes was already heated, and of course we do come, the temperatures are pretty high. Now, there's a lot that is going on, and the Kickstarter, we are going to be looking at government priorities for the financial year 2023-2024. Are they a match for the development agenda that the nation has? I have very indefatigable guests this morning. I'll be introducing them shortly, but let's first get on with our preamble. Government's key priorities in the proposed 2023-2024 budget focus on starting the construction of a standard gauge railway and finalisation of rehabilitation of sections of the already existing meter gauge railway under what's being described as the Integrated Transport Programme. Government also intends to invest in small-scale solar-powered irrigation as one of the ways of addressing climate change and food security under the Agro Industrialisation Programme. We are joined by Dr. Bainomugisha, Executive Director at ACOD, and Sarah Bireete, a Policy Analyst and Chief Executive at the Centre for Constitutional Governance. They will be giving us their perspective and helping us navigate the very murky waters of the economy. Welcome to the program, Sarah Bireete and Dr. Bainomugisha.
Thank you. And
let me begin with yesterday's events, International Labour Day, and of course there was a lot that was a point of reflection from all stakeholders across the country, from the workers, the policymakers, the employers, the activists. What do you make of Uganda's state of affairs when it comes to labor? First, Sarah Bireete.
I think for me the highlight was the report ahead of the Labour Day by the Ministry of Gender, showing that half of our labour force is unable to get jobs. But also coupled with that is the recent report by Bank of Uganda showing that only 1% of the population earn 1 million and above, and you have 42.5% of the population earning 150,000 a month.
150,000
a month.
Wow.
With our cost of living. So we have 50% of our labor force unable to find what to do. You have 50% of the employed labor force underemployed or under, really, because 150,000 to a working adult, you don't even wish to call that employment. And then you have 1% of our population earning 1 million and above. Our pay threshold is 235,000, which is also too low. Because what are you taxing? For somebody earning less than 1 million, what are you taxing? How do they have a range of indirect taxes
already
that they pay?
Yeah.
So to me, pay should start at 1 million, and then you have 1% of Ugandans who should pay. We should go towards wealth tax. What are you taxing from less than 500? What are you taxing? How would they come to work? Even that money, somebody earning 1 million and below, you are just facilitating them to get to work. You are not even facilitating them to afford like dinner away from work, hoping that you can provide a meal at work. And how many employers do that? So these are the complexities of our labor force. And at times you don't know whether it makes sense even to make Labour Day public holiday. Maybe it should be Reflection Day. The leaders who go for speeches should form a think tank and they start discussing what they can do as leaders instead of making flowery speeches.
All right, Dr. Bainomugisha, Sarah Bireete gives a very damning assessment, and of course it is one that many Ugandans may agree with. What's your take?
Yeah, I think we are because Sarah gives the statistics that are good, but also beyond that, of course, we need to look at the Ugandan labor force. But most of we are in informal sector.
Yeah.
Most of our people are in informal sector, and actually they are working. but most of their work is not captured, even in our statistics, especially the women who are largely in agriculture and subsistence production, but they have sustained us. It's very interesting because Uganda has largely remained subsistent, and I think the issue now is to try to formalize, to help the population to formalize their work, or even to go deep and quantify their contribution. For example, how much do you give to the women of this country who have the 1% and actually shoulder much of the production? Of course, unfortunately, most men have taken to drinking. They are not actually a lot into production, but the women actually are busy working. They are shouldering actually this economy, and you know this economy depends on agriculture. 80% of our population is still employed in agriculture, and when you go there, that 80% are largely women. And so, Sarah, I would rather now celebrate women's contribution on the Labor Day and actually try to amplify their voice and recognize them and give them medals, even when their contribution is not captured, because they have naturally these children that you see. The population has grown. Who has actually made this population grow? Even our people, children survive measles and all that. So if you quantify that, I still see that. But I think moving forward also is to skill. Is to skill. I think government sometimes does lip service. A policy comes up like skilling Uganda, but then down the road it is not followed through. Why don't we skill our people? Skill them consistently, and then of course deploy them. Because Uganda is lucky that we have a burgeoning youth. Majority of our people are young people.
Young people.
The country
70%.
70, actually almost 74%. We have not invested in tapping the potential of our young people who are energetic and sometimes innovative and adaptive to change. So the need and indeed the urgency to skill and formalize our young people and put them in the sector, and then tax them, of course, is important. But actually, if we go deep, I also want to challenge government to build the private sector. I think there's too much.
It's been left on its own devices.
And yet on the paper, Uganda is a private sector-led economy. But when government doesn't release money, the private sector is almost decimated, which means it's not a private sector-led economy. We need to deliberately invest in the private sector, and the private sector can actually absorb our huge young people and then pay them. Then we could even be negotiating how much to pay them. But the informality now, look at the young people who actually work as house helpers. Who knows them? How many are they? There
isn't sufficient data to tell us exactly how many they are and what kind of return they do get.
You could even tax them.
I see that's a point of disagreement with Sarah Bireete, because she already thinks if you're under 1 million, you shouldn't be taxed. Then that means you'll be paying those people a lot of money. When you look at the state of affairs and the priorities for the next financial year, government has been very categoric and clear about the National Budget Framework Paper, proposing 50 trillion shilling budget for the next year. That, of course, is expected, or should have, has already been adopted by Parliament. I will just go through what it hinges on here. Government priorities center at peace and security. Of course, that one is under the Security and Governance Programme. Roads, electricity, railways, irrigation, using solar power, industrial parks, support to medical schools and science-based research and development, enhancing support, especially through the parish development model, oil and gas development, capitalization of the Development Bank and the Uganda Development Corporation. These are a plethora of areas, and of course government comes out and lays the plan of how it's going to do what and at what point. Sarah Bireete, you've read the National Budget Framework Paper. Do you see this time round there is a clear path to achieving the kind of results that government wants? Because many times it's been a case of we didn't meet our objectives the last time around, including revenue collection. This time around, do you see realignment that should be able to bring forth the results?
I think for the second consecutive financial year, the Ministry of Finance is aligning the National Budget Framework Paper to the principles and objectives of the National Planning Development, NDP3.
Yeah.
So that's what shifted the planning to be program-based, based on the key programs in the NDP3.
Yeah.
But the devil is always in the details. So when you look at the programming aspect of it, it looks beautiful. But when you go into the details, the biggest chunk of our money goes into security and then Office of the President. And the other priority areas, because the ideal priority focus for any country to develop, one should be, of course, the security. You must secure the territorial integrity and the citizens of a country. But away from that, then you need to focus on the quality of education, which builds into the quality of the citizenry, to produce a globally competent citizen. You know, and so I think, especially on that one, the access, the right of access to quality education in Uganda is the biggest dilemma. Then the next priority should be health, because as you build into the, you know, the human capital development, how healthy are you as a nation to be able to build the quality of a citizen that should globally compete? That's where we are lacking most. Then what follows there are the basic social services. Once you have the 4 key elements, you create what is known as social peace. And that was the basis of development in Singapore. Creation of social peace. And then you go into manufacturing, you go into investment, you go into, but you have harmonized the basics as a country. The education committee has been in parliament, has been struggling because the proposed budget does not meet the priorities, the basic priorities in the education sector. And they summoned the officials from Ministry of Health, where then the minister said for finance that he cannot mortgage the country because of priorities in education. But where did the priorities then shift? If you look at, there's a story run by Daily Mont on Saturday, the winners and losers in the budget. Yeah. You have 4.2 billion going to Pornography Control Committee. That is our basic, our important priority. You have 9.1 billion Office of the President for ceremonies and patriotism clubs. You have 7.2 billion for construction of RDC's offices. You have 35.4 billion for procurement of a fleet, Office of the President. 5.1 billion for offices for newly appointed presidential advisors. 2.8 billion for formulation of anti-corruption laws. And 20 billion, which I think is the most important priority out of the winners, Chira Motors for commercialization of their, you know, innovations. I think that is the only item on this list that makes sense in terms of prioritization. The rest of the things, to find that we are justifying construction of RDC's offices against education, money for pornography committee, money for patriotism clubs. You know, all this is wastage.
Interesting there. Very, the details, like she
the devil.
said, have the devil lurking. Dr. Bainomugisha, Sarah Bireete spoke about the fact that global trends, especially when it comes to our ability to develop a workforce that can be as productive as any other person out there. The education sector is seeing a push for realignment of the curriculum to be able to produce the kind of people that need to be produced, to be the better workers. I think that is commendable effort, but something that comes a little bit too late. What do you make of it?
Not too late. I think that's good. But to be honest, yeah, I think no, honestly, first of all, I want to paint not really so much of a gloomy picture, and to appreciate people, especially in the
gloss on
finance.
it, gloss on it.
Because actually, in April 2023, we posted an average growth of 6.8 of our GDP. So the economy is recovering.
Okay.
And so I think that's commendable, especially to the colleagues at Ministry of Finance and other people, of course, to government. But there are serious challenges, as Sarah is talking about, that this country is facing, and indeed many countries in the world, of course, like the infrastructure, which has almost collapsed. And I think government must focus on that. If we can't move our products from where they are produced to the market, if it takes a lot, so many hours to move from one place to another, destruction of vehicles, the repairs, that's dangerous. But I want to agree also with Sarah on the alignment of the budget. The national development plan is very commendable, and perhaps maybe that explains why the economy is recovering. It was battered by some of the conditions that are not ours, but also that are ours, and I wanted to point out some of those. For example, the budget, we have to agree that Uganda is a nature-based economy. Our development has to go, it's agro-based. That's what God has given us. We have that comparative advantage. But apparently the agricultural sector is being decimated or affected by climate change, which is a global phenomenon, but we can do something here. But we don't see government, especially this budget, investing seriously in climate change adaptation and mitigation. In fact, it has reduced the money. Ministry of Finance has created a climate change unit in the Ministry of Finance. That is commendable. But this must be supplemented. Actually, what moves things is the money. Is there the money? We have seen the money reducing to 1%. Now, it was 2% of the national budget money going there. Now it is actually 1%, which means lack of privatization for investment in climate change. You saw yesterday, it rained from the other day, yesterday, and you know at the end of that, it destroyed most of our infrastructure. It has reversed our development. People died and landslides. But the other investment, so that one is very, very critical. We want to see government putting money where actually it's going to cause a lot of multiplier effect. But we also, I want also to agree with Sarah on of course, human development, human capital development, education, and health. For we work with the message, which is a U.S. company, to promote the government of Uganda has also developed a 10-year roadmap for self-reliance in terms of financing of essential medicines to deal with the HIV, malaria, TB, and others. 70% of the money for funding those essential medicine comes from the donors, actually largely from the US. And so the 10-year roadmap that has been developed, but we don't see government putting, we had agreed how much money should be put so that in 10 years government of Uganda can become self-sufficient. You see, health is security. When you give away security of your citizens to other people, if they have other priorities, they run away. We saw the Americans scattered in Afghanistan. Even in COVID, when actually the vaccines became they were weaponized. And so we need that self-reliance. But now, if we and this has been signed on the 10-year roadmap, but we see now government has not actually added any money so that in 10 years we take over. But also you see what is happening in the health sector. As she rightly said, a healthy population is productive. And the most important resource of any country are its citizens. That's where you invest first. You invest in their education, which is skills and knowledge. You also invest in their health, and then they are productive. They develop their country. You can even tax. So we need to see that one. We also see that government has not. It's it is still expensive government. The cost of running the government is so high, and the government had come up with the rationalization, merger of agencies and the authorities. And actually in December 2022, a final list of merger came out, and we thought that the government was going to move fast because it would save, I think, over 800 billion dealing with redundancies, duplication of service. I know this is not an easy reform, but government must be prepared to actually implement this one and save that money and run a lean and efficient government. But also liberate those people who are redundant, and they are educated, by the way.
Yeah.
These are graduates, they have degrees, they have diplomas. Liberate them, push them into the private sector, equip them with the money. Actually, because you see people, they will be equipped. If you lose your job, they will equip you, and then in so doing, boost the private sector. Because what we have to do as affirmative action is actually to build the private sector and let this economy be led by the private sector. The final point, my brother, has to do with corruption. Again, corruption is a cancer, and I see the president
he has come up
with another proposal, which shows that actually it is actually touching, it is hurting, because if you lose 20 trillion annually of your budget, and it's half, almost 50%, actually domestically we raise about 29 trillion, and then we lose 20, so we have actually 9. So essentially, as a country, now corruption has reached a breaking point. You see, corruption cannot be eradicated, just like poverty, like prostitution, but you would have to hit its head, reduce it, that it should not break, because it can break a state.
That's right.
It can break a country. So I wish the president, I would support that all efforts are marshaled to curb corruption to a level that actually, like HIV, AIDS, push it into the marrow, that the rest of the body's health can be productive and move, so that we can move. I know it cannot be eradicated, but we must reduce corruption. If you don't, there will be no development and there will be state breaking.
That's an interesting analogy there. Sarah Bireete, when you hear Dr. Arthur Bainomugisha saying that the president seems to understand that corruption has reached levels that are unsustainable and he must do something about it, and you look at the creation of a new anti-corruption body. I don't know whether it will work within the already existing litany of agencies to fight corruption. How is it going to play out?
Yeah, I think the creation of a new body is not a solution. If the president wanted to help the investors and stop because that's the point. He wants to create a new body for investors, corruption in investment. Since he has
to halt bribing.
Yes, since he has an anti-corruption body in his State House.
It's a unit.
A unit. I know that there is a constitutional court challenge on its mandate.
Legality, yeah.
But in some instances, it has done some little good work. Even the legality issues notwithstanding. So I think since he has already that body, he can only add a hotline with a trusted office and say, in case of any issue, call at any time. It is on 24 hours. You do not need another agency again in the State House, which we will also face.
Maybe he's already facing trouble with this agency in how it works.
No, but you see, a unit cannot have challenges. If officers in the unit have issues, remove the officers. But you can't go on duplicating and duplicating. That will increase add another burden to our budget, because a unit needs resources to run. I think all you need is an officer, say this is a hotline, call any time of the day or night, report corruption for the investors. But when you go to the work of IGG, the new IGG has tried. I know that one of her major flagship projects, the lifestyle audit, was halted. But she's trying to reassert, her mandate as an IGG, and we commend her, Honorable Beth Kamya. I wish you could do more. Yes, there is much more to do. The new DPP has also moved, although it has slowed down. When normally the talk in Uganda has been that people go for the small fish, but in Karamoja Mawat issue, people say the sanction files were ready, but the arrest stopped. I hope that whoever is involved in Karamoja saga will be dealt with. But also we need more. NSSF and other issues, they should all be addressed. And I agree with what Dr. Arthur Bainomugisha has submitted. Really, we can't lose 20 billion. Trillion of the annual budget. That is almost half of the budget. It's corruption.
Okay, as experts in governance and policy issues, I think we are best suited to advise government on where exactly it ought to do. I'll be asking you very shortly to take us through how the capitalization of the Uganda Development Bank, the best possible way, can help us go forward, and what is not being done right now. But let me first pick Sarah Bireete's mind on the issue Doctor spoke about, the cost of public service, RDCs and everything. That the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Ramadan Gobi, has rolled out a series of policies to ensure there is, it becomes leaner. But then again, when I see what you have come up with, it looks like Mr. Gobi is being told, hey, what are you up to? How is he going to achieve his policy framework rollout?
Well, Mr. Gobi means so well in terms of really, reshaping the focus of Ministry of Finance and the focus of where taxpayers' money should go. And he's giving it his all. And I also want to commend his efforts.
He's doing a good job.
Yes, but when you look at the bloated public administration bill in this country, you have 81 ministers. You have 535 MPs. We have the biggest parliament in Africa, and we are competing with India, which has a population of 6 billion population. Yeah. So when we are just 42 million people, we are competing with the size of parliament of 6 billion people.
The interesting thing is that these very gentlemen are the ones that are supposed to discuss whether we reshape their size, or it's
I think we need to come up with a radical approach, cut our parliament by half.
How can that be achieved? The president should come up with a
Every district should have 2 representatives, male and female. That will help us reduce the size of parliament, but also attain gender equality, where we are supposed to be moving to parity, as per the SDG 15 and also the African Union agenda 6 of gender parity. So we'll achieve so much by just taking one simple decision to say every district should have 1 male and 1 female MPs. Then we need to move to cabinet. The constitution had solved the issue of cabinet by limiting it to 23 cabinet ministers and 23 ministers of state. So a maximum should have been 46 members of cabinet. And you add a prime minister, VP and president, which makes it 49. But look at where we are at 81. So that is in violation of the constitution. We need to go back to the constitutional threshold. And that debate was resolved. So please, Mr. President, in your reshuffle, give us a cabinet of 46 ministers.
Okay.
And then RDCs. There has always been a proposal to do away with RDCs. I don't even know why.
We have their deputies.
I don't know why we are moving to reconstruct offices for RDCs. District headquarters have offices. All you need is to say, give us space for an RDC. Like, for example, Bishenyi, where I come from, the district headquarters have even vacant space. So why can't an RDC go and occupy part of that building? Why do you need to construct an office for an RDC?
Interesting. Doctor, Uganda Development Bank and the Uganda Development Corporation. You spoke earlier about the need to put the private sector at the forefront when it comes to policy rollout, helping it be able to be the engine of our economic transformation. What hasn't been done and what ought to be done with regard to capitalization?
I want to first to respond to my sister just 1 minute on the big cabinet, on the big parliament. That sometimes, of course, as policy analysts, yes, we advise the ideal. But then there's the reality when you are in power. President Sarah Bireete when he's in power, because you have gone deep into the budget and looked at those, because all these actually, this appropriation is legal. And so you are not going to find any of these not budgeted for. So you have to put some money in there, even like the public library, which is not used, it has a vote. And the point I'm talking about is that there is always a reality of running the government, and sometimes my sympathy to the president is because of Uganda, where we are coming from. And then, of course, we have to perfect as we go along, because largely a country coming from conflict, very conflict prone. So sometimes, and I know he has a reason, sometimes as a peacemaker, I see the reasoning that the cost of fighting of these civil wars sometimes is minimized by of course, by a big government to have everyone feel that is there. And then when the guns have fallen silent, then you begin to scale down and scale down as development also comes in. Yeah, because
where are the guns? I thought for 20 years we silenced the guns.
No, because we still have people who are brought in. Moses I is still in the government. He was part of the fighting group. You absorbed his armies are still there. So that affirmative action. But you're also right. As you move forward, then you begin to take away that baggage. We call it the baggage, and scale down and build efficiency. In terms of the Uganda Development Bank, I think it's a very good thing, and the capitalization of the Uganda Development Bank is one way of actually strengthening the private sector. The only challenge, I think, that and actually we worked, Accord has worked closely with the Uganda Development Bank, and even influenced them somehow, can't claim 100%, to set up a unit on climate change financing, which was launched actually like three weeks ago to respond to climate change, because we didn't have money. So for people to access, especially these farmers, the challenge with the and actually government also has put their money to revamp for businesses that were ailing to access money and recover. And unfortunately, the challenge that we still have is accessibility. It is here in Kampala, and actually most of our production takes place in
far-flung areas.
Far areas. Yeah. So how would people even know that there are certain that there's money, how to access it? So the need for them to decentralize, and they can find a way of decentralizing, not building, but they must reach the people that need that money. But also have found out that actually the money that they had, for example, they had designed like guidelines that made it very difficult for ailing business to access it. And because that money was given to the commercial banks. But commercial banks choose to give their very expensive loans and not government of Uganda money, which is I think like 12%. They give the one of 24%, and people take. Why? Because of the stringent guidelines of accessing that money. And again, most of our business people are in informal sector. They don't have accountants. They can't have audited accounts. So we will need to deliberately or affirmatively access that money to our private sector who are in informal sector and build their capacity actually to develop. Because 70% of actually of the jobs in this country is by small scale, small and medium enterprises.
Interesting eye-opener there on what is no doubt a drag to access to credit, especially when it comes to commercial banks. The other day, the Bank of Uganda was saying that the reason they keep the rates high is because they have shareholders who want profits and they won't take anything other than that. And then they have their cost of IT apparently to be able to roll out these services, and then the cost of operations. And that was the reason as to why the Bank of Uganda, of course in its regulatory mandate, couldn't do much when it comes to the high interest rates. But that is a question and a debate for another day. Sarah Bireete, the president said yesterday that 70 million jobs are going to be created under PDM, and how it's going to be rolled out. The president says it is not much a case of improving the pay to the current workforce, but to create a bigger workforce.
You know, NDP3 lists our development challenge as the need to plan for and harness the potential of young people who are the majority. 78% of Uganda's population are aged 30 years and below, and of course minus children and teenagers. So you have the thrust of that as youth. At 18, either people are in high school, joining university, or they are going into the workforce if they have not gone for further studies. So the issue of skilling that Dr. Arthur mentioned comes in handy on this. As you create 70 million people jobs, first of all, we are a population of 42 million. So you create 70 million, 70 million jobs for
All right, I think I was gotten on the wrong end on that. Interesting. Yeah, there are people who can do
But
5
you can
jobs.
bring in foreigners. America,
Yeah.
why are people going to America?
no, okay.
All
By
right,
the way,
okay.
Work.
Oh my God,
So-
how did I miss that?
yeah, so you create 70. Why don't you first deal with 42? The 42 million population, half of them are children. They don't even need jobs. So first give us 20 jobs. That would be a better target.
20 million.
Yes, 20 million.
20 million jobs than 70 million jobs. The second issue, like you talked about, capitalization of UDB. Who accesses money at UDB? Can these youth access money? It's always the biggest businesses that benefit from opportunities that we create.
Businesses that already have
Have
capital enough
leverage,
to
yes.
take them forward.
So the issue of access to that money that is at UDB should be debated at length by Parliament. Also, UDB has a category of people they list as political risks. For example, some of us who come here and are talking on very sure I cannot apply. Ferron at UDB, I'm listed as a political risk person.
Are you sure?
So yes.
UDB.
It's a damning assessment of UDB's. No, UDB can't respond right now on what you're suggesting. Perhaps
I know, but when they
yeah.
come here, we need to discuss who accesses money at UDB. And I know several people in business who have applied for this money and they've failed to get it.
Okay, that is something we shall address, and it's a question that we shall put to UDB when we have
Yes,
the
my
opportunity.
last issue I want to talk
Yeah,
about
very
is
lastly.
yes, the challenge with the new taxes. As we move to create jobs, I know that there are several amendment bills before Parliament, tax amendment bills, and I want to comment about two amendments.
Very
One is
quickly,
the
we are out of time.
capital gains tax, where it is moving to capture every income through withholding tax
tax,
of
yeah.
5% instead of charging interest on profit that was original. So it means that even today, if you sell your beautiful suit, you are supposed to withhold, a buyer is supposed to withhold 5% from you.
Which is double taxation.
Yes. Then the other issue is the digital services tax, which impacts on our access to internet and will affect the creative industry, the innovation abilities, and the transformation of Uganda into the digital revolution. When the developed world has moved into fifth revolution, we have not benefited from the fourth.
I want to comment on
Last
taxation.
word.
Thank you.
60 broadcasting seconds.
Yes, on taxation, a good taxation regime should enable or actually unleash the potential of a society to be productive.
Yes.
What we see now is actually kind of regressive kind of taxation regime that actually kills that potential. And I want to speak to you, URA, for example, the double taxation, the taxing money that people have earned actually through NSSF
and savings,
and savings,
yes.
and you want to follow it, which has already been, that's not good. But secondly, if you follow most of the most of the people, they have taxed those businesses, and when you follow them up and find they have closed down, what message is there? I think the URA should have a policy that enables businesses actually to recover, to create more businesses which can be taxed than actually tax them to death, and then next day you have nothing actually to tax. So I think URA, I know you're under pressure to meet the threshold, but you also must be mindful that you have to feed the cow that you milk.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Arthur Bainomugisha, Executive Director at ACOD and Policy Analyst. Many thanks to you too, Sarah Bireete, Policy Analyst too, and of course Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance. Whether the priorities that have been stated by government in the budget framework paper are a fit for the development agenda remains to be seen. Of course, we shall be studying the ins and outs of that as the budget comes up later this year, very shortly, should not be more than 2 months. That will do it for our Kickstarter discussion, but do stay with us if you can. Just simply refill that cup of coffee. We shall be talking doctors and the health care sector in the country. A senior house officer will be here to explain to us what is happening, or should I say what's not happening. Stay with us.